So here's a question for you. Donald Trump,
Yeah.
greatest president ever or just a great president?
Those are my only two choices.
What do you say?
I think
Greatest or just great?
it'd have to be just great. There's no way it can be greatest, right?
Why isn't he the greatest?
Okay. This interview is not going to last long enough for me to explain why he's not the greatest. I think he's the greatest worst president we've ever had. By that I mean he is so bad he makes James Buchanan look good. All right? And Buchanan was the guy that kicked around and waited for the Civil War to start. So he was pretty crappy. This guy is a big problem because I think he honestly doesn't know he's a big problem. I think he believes what he's telling everybody, which is dangerous.
The lack of self-analysis, and I was actually reading a book about some of the great pitchers. Some young, I can't remember the name, and one of the pitchers who was given this interview said that one of the best pitchers that he ever saw was able to self-diagnose and fix.
Yeah.
Very unique. All the top athletes are able to do that, where during a game they say, this isn't working, I'm going to try, I'm going to do
Okay,
this.
so think about that. So
Right.
what is a president good at?
Right.
Because he is good
Our
at something.
current president.
Our current president, he is good at something.
Okay.
He's good at
Yeah, what's that?
He's good at promotion and marketing.
Okay.
So there's a guy by the name of Malcolm Gladwell. Don't know if you ever heard about this.
I
He
don't.
wrote a
I'm not.
book called Outliers, and he premises that you become an expert in something if you spent 10,000 hours doing it.
That's
So
right.
these pitchers that self-correct,
Right.
they know their bodies incredibly well. They know what's going wrong because they've spent so much time doing it.
Right.
Now, if you compare that to what Donald Trump does,
Right.
does he know anything about foreign policy? No. Does he know anything about economics? No.
Right.
Does he know anything about social justice?
Right.
No. What does he know about? Marketing and self-promotion.
Right.
So he's on Twitter nonstop.
Yes.
And what is he doing? He's pushing his product, which is himself.
Right.
Right? Irrespective of that. So in that case, he's got a level of expertise. I would like to see some expertise in some of these other areas. Right?
That's true.
Okay?
Now with one of these other books I was reading about deliberate practice, they say what you actually have to have is focus, but also feedback.
Yeah.
Do you believe he's able to take feedback?
No. I think there are very few people, if any at all, that can actually look him in the eye and honestly tell him that you're messing something up. And he will accept it as genuine criticism.
Okay.
Right? I really believe this guy is the most narcissistic individual I've ever seen in my life, to the point of mania. Right?
How old are you?
I'm 60.
And you're saying ever in your whole life, every single person you've gone from either elementary school all the way up to
Right. Well, and through your career, you meet people that are, we used to call them conceited, or we used to call them full of themselves, or so on. But this is incredibly different.
Okay.
It's somebody that actually believes his own press clippings about him. If you see when he is happiest, it's when he's in front of these rallies that he's doing, right? He pulls energy out of that because it's nothing but adulation. So he's got to have this self-aggrandizement going on all the time. Last Friday, when he vetoed the resolution of disapproval, he had all of his cabinet members around him, and they all were spouting off these sycophantic phrases to him. Mike Pence, the vice president, a constitutionally defined officer in this country, the vice president of the United States, said, I don't think I've been prouder to stand by this desk with you than at this point in the time. You showed true leadership here. And what did he do? He vetoed a bill that basically said, I'm going to behave unconstitutionally, irrespective of whether Congress authorizes me to do this or not.
So Pence didn't have the ability or didn't have the courage to say,
No.
this is wrong.
And this is a problem. This is a problem
Because you're
with his cabinet.
circumventing the Constitution. You were
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, and this has been a problem with his cabinet from the onset. There have been very few people that have actually said, you can't do these things. If they did that, they're not there anymore.
Okay. So as I understand, he's just great, not the greatest.
Just great. Just great. Just a little bit.
Okay. So you say that you try to help local candidates get elected.
Exactly.
So what characteristics, you just said some of the characteristics you don't think are characteristics that are good in the president.
Right.
So what are you looking for in local candidates that make them viable, make them get the ability to get elected.
Well, it helps if they know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, that always
right.
helps.
So that's a good thing. That's kind
a
of
good thing.
that's kind of a baseline start. If you come tell me that you want to do something about education policy, I'm going to say, okay, what's next?
Right.
So let me hear it. Right. So it helps if they have a command of their subject. Right. It also helps if they've got a level of genuine desire to do well for people. This job is not, especially in local politics, you're not going to get rich doing this.
Absolutely
right?
not.
If you're a state rep, you're in session every couple of years. You get I think a salary of $7,800 and a stipend of about $100 a day per diem. So you're not going to go buy a yacht off of that salary. So you need to be committed to do something positive, right? So what I look for is somebody that genuinely says, listen, there's a problem here. It's bothered me for a long time. I want to go fix this, and I'm going to get to Austin, or I want to get to the city council, or I want to get to the United States Congress, and I want to work with people to solve this problem. It helps also if people recognize that not everybody, the fix isn't the same for everybody, right? We look for the easy solutions all the time. A lot of this stuff is very hard. There's been a lot of good progressive legislation passed over my lifetime. I've grown up during the Civil Rights era. I've seen women's rights, the Violence Against Women Act passed. I've seen the American Disabilities Act passed. I've seen strengthening of civil rights laws. I've seen weakening of civil rights laws.
So you're saying that the solutions aren't easy.
No.
But are you also saying that the candidates have to have an ability to work with other people?
They have to be able to work with other people. They have to recognize that I can't fix this overnight, right? I can't come in unless you have your party, the way the system is set up, has a sweeping mandate. So you get 75% of the electorate, right? You have a mandate to go do something. So then it's a matter of getting the laws written, debated, and put into policy. But let's take the 2016 presidential election as an example. There was no mandate there. The president did not win the popular vote. More people voted against him than voted for him. Now, you ask what I look for in a candidate. That's a great example of somebody that could have gone a long way to bring this country together by stepping up on his victory speech that night saying, listen, I recognize that this country is polarized. I recognize that more people voted against me than voted for me. It is going to be my commitment to you to bring this country together, to work for things that help everybody. Stop being so divided amongst yourselves. Let's get together because we have big problems to solve. Instead, he gets up there and talks about how much carnage is in the street, how terrible Chicago is, how awful all of these things are, and that he's going to fix it. I'm not looking for Dudley Do-Right or Superman. I'm looking for a guy that says, I'm going to roll my sleeves up, I'm going to get in this, I'm going to do the hard, heavy lifting, I'm going to have the arguments with people, but at the end of the day, we're going to have something substantive for the people that I serve. So I said serve. A candidate and eventually an elected official is a servant. The idea of servant leadership weighs heavy with me. This is somebody that recognizes that they have a job, it's a temporary job, right? And they better do it well because their employers are the people that put them there in the first place, and they will remove them if they don't do a good enough job.
Well, Trump said that he wanted to be president for life,
yes.
Just like Xi.
Yeah. I don't think that's possible here, although I'm not as convinced of it today as I was 18 months ago, because the unitary executive, have you heard this term before?
No.
Okay. The idea of the unitary executive is an executive governor or a president that has all of these enumerated powers, but also unenumerated powers, because they might make sense. So we have a national emergency at the border, right? Now, legislatively, the president has the authorization based on some laws that were passed in 1976 to declare a national emergency. Usually those things are done to get rid of the roadblocks and the red tape for federal funds to go to storm areas or fire areas or things like that, right? But no, what he's decided is that we're being invaded by these hordes of people that want to come in and do us harm. Therefore, he's going to declare a national emergency to take money that has been appropriated by Congress, which is their constitutional duty, It's been appropriated by Congress to specific branches of government and use that to build his wall.
Including the military, as I understand.
Including the military. They're going to go initiate land seizures from private landowners right now so they can get the right-of-ways to build their wall. So they're going to enforce eminent domain in this. So he is acting extra constitutional because he's going against what the Congress has said.
Now, many people have said Lincoln, during the Civil War,
Yeah.
overreached.
Well, I think he did.
Right.
Rid of habeas corpus and so on. So, listen, there's going to be moments in time. Roosevelt screwed up miserably when he interred 140,000 Japanese in the internment plants, right?
Why is this situation different than those situations?
Because we are not under threat of invasion or harm. If you remember in the Civil War, the country was completely split apart. Brothers were killing brothers. To this day, it took the most casualties of any other military conflict we've been involved in. 800,000 people died. So there was a massive difference in terms of the impact of any particular issue when you compare it with the situation today. Roosevelt's issue with the Japanese was a complete overreach. Complete overreach. Should never have been done, and it's a stain on our history, right? Absolutely. But there are going to be moments in time like that, the Bay of Pigs, in the waning hours of the Eisenhower administration, the early days of the Kennedy administration. Terrible thing to happen, right? But, these guys are human. They're not statues. However, the difference today compared to whether it's Lincoln or whether it's Franklin Roosevelt or Teddy Roosevelt, I believe this, and I believe this in my heart of hearts. If the Supreme Court came and said, you cannot do this, you do not have the authority to do it, they would have stood down. If the Congress said, you cannot do this, then they might have stood down or might not have stood down. What Trump has done, and again, depending upon the issue, Truman seized the steel mills during the Korean War.
Absolutely.
Congress said, you can't do that. He said, I'm going to do it anyway because I need the steel. It went to the Supreme Court, and they said, you can't do that, Mr. President. So they backed away. In this case, there's a level of serendipity that is protecting the president. You have a recalcitrant Senate that will not hold him to account, and you have a Supreme Court now that is skewed towards favoring the unitary executive. They favor broad sweeping powers. They think that the president should be unencumbered to be able to do these kinds of things. And that's dangerous, especially when you have somebody that says, hey, it'd be nice to be president for life.
So your podcast is your way.
It's my antidote. It's my antidote for my own sanity. It's my antidote for people that are like-minded, that are looking to hear an opinion from either in the two old guys' case, a little bit more.
No, that's the
sophomoric.
That's not. That's not.
A little bit more sophomoric opinion.
You're just trying to get.
In Riding the Wave, which is the other podcast, that's more serious, and it's focused on really understanding what it's like to be a candidate. So our first guest was Steve Riddle, who was a candidate for state representative.
District
92.
92. Thank you.
Yeah. And so Steve had a remarkable run in 2018. He closed an election gap of significant numbers and lost his race by 2%. It was still a loss. But this has been a consistently Republican district for decades. And he was able to go out and talk to people and have a reasonable conversation. You asked about my ideal candidate. Steve Riddle is an example of that because he can have a conversation with somebody that fundamentally disagrees with him on several core issues, but they can find common ground on something to fix.
Where do you want to take your podcast? What do you want to do with it? Are you doing it? So you said this is your way to stay sane.
Yeah.
I think that was your words.
Yeah.
I forgot what you said.
Yeah, exactly right.
So you're doing it for you, but you also want to try to get your message out.